Hello and welcome to the Afghanistan podcast. Great news. This is now our 49th episode. It seems like only yesterday when we first started. I think I'm having too much fun. Also, exciting news that we have now surpassed 1,000 subscribers, which is a big milestone for any new channel on YouTube. So if you have subscribed, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And if you have not done so yet, then please, I would urge you to go ahead and do that. It really helps small channels build a presence on YouTube. So please go ahead and do that. If it so happens that you have been thinking of starting your own channel or your podcast, then definitely do start, because it's so much fun and it's really rewarding in more ways than you can imagine. So don't hesitate. Start as soon as possible. I assure you, once you do start, the only thing you're going to regret is why you didn't start sooner. So if there's anything I can do to help, get in touch through the comments or through our website, and I'd love to speak with you and see how I can help. If you do have your own channel, your own podcast, and you're struggling to keep up with things, then again, get in touch with us through the website, because we do provide services to help other podcasters, other YouTube content creators with their video editing, audio editing, all sorts of other services. So if there's anything we can do to help, I'd love to be able to speak to you about that. Thank you so much. Now let's get started. Dr. Alexander.rahr, welcome to the Afghanistan podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Doctor. For those who may have missed it, we had Alexander on the show not too long ago to discuss the situation in Ukraine. And I really enjoyed that discussion because Alexander was able to take us to levels that, at least for me, it was a lot of new information. So if anyone's missed that episode, we'll put a link to it, and I highly recommend you go and watch that after this episode. Today, I wanted to pick Alexander's brain on the situation in West Asia, or the Middle East, as it's called. Alexander, there's so much going on in the Middle East. There's obviously the situation in Gaza, in Lebanon, in Syria, Iraq. There's just so much happening. But to keep our focus and to keep us within time limits, of course, I wanted to concentrate today on what's happening in Yemen and also the ongoing negotiations between the US and Iran. What do you think?
Well, I'm in a very alarmist mood because we have entered again a very critical stage of politics in the Middle East, where the United States, together with Israel, are threatening to bomb Iran, and the negotiations about the so-called nuclear program of Iran are not really taking place. Nobody knows what the final reaction of Israel, the United States, or Iran in this matter will be. And again, like a couple of years ago, we are in front of a possible catastrophe concerning war in this region. Or at least we do not see that a solution on the Iranian atomic program is being seriously discussed, or is ready, is on the table. You asked me, of course, as a European, as a German specialist. For the European and the German public, this issue, unfortunately, and this is a mistake, seems so far away, because Europe and Germany are preoccupied with the Ukrainian conflict. But nevertheless, in my opinion, if you ask me, a real war in Iran will, of course, lead to an explosion in the whole Middle East, with consequences for Eurasia, but particularly also for Europe. And we will not escape this new crisis and the results of the war here.
You're so right, Alexander. And also the method of negotiation just seems so erratic, with like threats. And Trump's kind of mantra is that he's unpredictable, and he takes advantage of that unpredictability. But that unpredictability can really backfire badly in geopolitics. You need to have some kind of predictability, some kind of understanding, where if if you do X, then the opponent is going to do Y. But if there is no predictability, it makes it very hard for decision makers. Before we go further into Iran, I'd love to talk to you about the situation in Yemen. So what is the U.S. policy in Yemen? What are they trying to achieve over there?
I don't think that there is an American or a Western policy towards Yemen. It's only a show of force. What the United States wants to do is to present itself as as a dominant power in the Near East, in Middle East, as a military power which is still capable of defending the interests of Israel, the interests of the West around the Suez Channel and in the Persian Gulf. And this is, for me, nothing else as a demonstration of mightiness of military power of the United States, which has to show not so much the people and the fighters in Yemen, but the whole region and, of course, the whole world that the United States is still in. And it doesn't go out of the Middle East problems, and it's even pushing itself more and more into this whole great picture, which is newly developing in this part of the world.
It is crazy, Alexander. I mean, it seems like the Trump administration has learned nothing from the mistakes of the previous Biden administration. So, on one hand, it seems like Trump's administration is thinking that Biden didn't do enough, and if we bomb Yemen more, then we can achieve results that they weren't able to achieve. But then they forget that Saudi Arabia, backed by USA, tried this for 5 years and couldn't get anywhere, and at the end they had to go for negotiations. On the other hand, I don't know if, because in April there's been a lot of activity in Yemen, and one of those was the attacks on the oil factories in Yemen. Are they trying to kind of attack Yemen economically? Because that's not going to have like some immediate results, economic results, economic pain is going to be like a long-term strategy.
Again, I don't see any long-term strategy because the United States and the West have stopped developing a long-stage strategy in the Middle East for a couple of years ago, when the so-called, you remember this colored revolutions, the regime change.
Yes.
Revolutions all were rejected by the people of that part of the world and failed. Since then, I would say the European Union, especially in the West in general, is more or less out of this region. It's lost its interest. The United States is still the world dominant power, at least they see it like that. And especially when Trump came to power, he wanted to show results. He wanted to demonstrate that America is still great, that America is still there. And so far, he has not achieved anything. He has not achieved peace in Ukraine, as he promised.
Yeah.
He did not achieve anything of change for the better for Israel interests. The war is still going on in Gaza. I don't see any kind of real rapprochement between the United States and Saudi Arabia in the Middle East. I see only a new danger coming up with a possible war in Iran and newly the possible war between India and Pakistan, where
Yes.
the United States is completely out of the picture. So it's, I repeat myself, it's a game of muscles. It's a demonstration. No, we are still here. We are not out. Reckon with the United States, and I think it's an attempt also of the Trump administration to show that it's still vigorous and it's ready to tackle other issues like the Iranian issues, like the Ukrainian issues, like other issues with force, with mighty, with a kind of democracy, diplomacy of strength.
Yeah.
And America has no way back. I mean, if it turns away from these conflicts and admits that it's not strong enough to solve them, and that because the powers constellations in this region has so dramatically changed that the United States doesn't count anymore, then America is going to lose its dominant position in world politics. What would be something what Trump will never accept, in my point of view.
I think you're right. In all of these fronts, it seems like at the moment they're trying, and like you said, they're trying just by brute force to bring about change or bring about peace. And it doesn't seem to be working anywhere at the moment. And if it actually does fail, it's going to create a huge vacuum of power in global politics.
No, we have. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree with you. The problem is much more than only, say, the regional aspects of this crisis on the conflict which we're discussing.
Mhm.
If you ask me, I think we are living in a time now, 2024, 2025, and this time will be prolonged for another 5 or 10 years, when the world will witness one of the major changes which will occur to our planet in the past 100 years. These changes are as radical as those which we have seen in 1945, I would say, or in 1919, after the end of the First World War. We're seeing the creation, the real manifestation of a multipolar world.
Yeah.
And the old unipolar world, where practically the all rules of the games of the world economy, of world politics, of the globalization in the world, were set by Washington and partly by Brussels, but partly only by Brussels, mainly by Washington. This time is gone. We're seeing a multipolar world, a world with many poles, with countries like China, which in the last couple of years have circumvented in many ways the United States, have built up military forces, are economically in a position to challenge the United States and the West much more than ever before. And this world is now in a psychologically very difficult situation. Some countries have to learn, I mean, China, but India, Saudi Arabia, they have to learn how to deal with their new powers, with the new influence, with the new possibilities, including also economic ones, financial ones, and also military ones. And on the other hand, you have the countries which are on a descendant stage, which are losing influence, and they also have to learn very hard and very quick how to deal with their failures, with the fact that they are not the number one in the world anymore. And this is a psychologically very difficult moment for those states who have won or are winning, and for those states who are losing. And in this kind of situation in which we are now, of course, the tendency for wars, for settling the agenda by force and not by diplomacy, is growing, and that makes the place where we all live very dangerous in this way. And I guess, and I feel, and I see that the politicians who have to take the necessary decisions right now, the right decisions, in understanding, first of all, understanding the new world, and then acting in accordance with the new rules which have to be set, they are either overwhelmed with all these problems or are incapable from their psychology, from the mentality, to solve them, unfortunately.
Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode. Yes, all right. And it just seems like the Western powers in their worldview and the outlook, their policies are so short term and so impactful on world politics that is bringing is having the exact opposite result to what they should be looking for. So if they want to confront China, then doing so by bringing countries like Russia, Iran even closer to China than ever before, bringing all the BRICS nations, uniting them in fear of Western kind of hegemonic policies is completely the wrong way to go about things. But it seems like everything that they're doing just seems to have such a short-term kind of a outlook, and I'm not sure why that is. Is that like the effect of democracy, the fact that those countries are only looking 3 or 4 years ahead in their own terms, or I'm not entirely sure what's driving this.
What the problem is? The problem is triumphalism, the triumphs of the West, the notion, the understanding, maybe the wishful thinking, if you want, that the world will be run continually by Western interests, like it happened after the demise of the Soviet Union. The elites, which are now today in power, mostly in Asia, but particularly in the West, in Europe, in the United States, are a lot. I'm not meaning Trump, but others are relatively young people who do not remember the communist world anymore. They do not remember the Cold War as it happened. They remember very well how the Soviet Union disappeared within a couple of weeks, and the Cold War stopped. And they are interpreting the whole matter, which happened 35 years ago, in a catastrophically wrong way. They think that the West has won like the United States, the Soviet Union, or Great Britain had won in the Second World War in Yalta. This is not the case. Everyone won, and everyone lost 35 years ago during the end of the Cold War. Why lost? Because the countries, neither in the East, nor in the West, nor in the North, were capable of building a stable and peaceful world. They were not capable of reforming the UN to build institutions in the world, multipolar institution, which would suit to the new realities, and rely only on the former structures, on the former institutions, on former organizations where the West dominated them, is the wrong way into the future. It will lead to nothing, only to new conflicts. This is a problem in which our elites are. I don't think that they don't want to think what will be in 3 years. They're starting to think about the future, but they are not capable of understanding this, because the good mindset, their whole education is very ideological in this matter, that they think that they have the right morale, and the other countries, the other cultures, the other civilizations do not count vis-a-vis the strong civilization of the 1 billion people who live in the West, and who were always dominant and writing the rules for the globalized world and for the world institutions. That revolution has to happen in the heads and the minds of our politicians and of our elites in whole society. And this is not happening. And only then, if we understand that the world is so dramatically different than it was 10 years ago, 20 years or 30 years ago, then there will, and I assure you, there will be politicians, clever politicians coming, maybe not from the West, not necessarily from the West, but who will understand this and say, this is now the right moment to reform the UN, to reform the UN Security Council, to find a new way how to commonly rule the world, how to build maybe a new concert of mighty nations, which can not confront each other, but which will find some common ways how to stabilize the world, how to make the world more peaceful, how to maybe to invent a new peaceful project for the whole planet. But that will time. In times when we completely reject today the interests and what the Russians have to say, when we completely in the West reject what the Chinese have to say, we completely reject what the entire Islam world has to say. Yes. Now the Europeans reject what Trump has to say, what the United States is doing. Well, that creates, in my view, I repeat myself, sorry, a very dangerous psychologically, first of all, but in future also from the security aspect, a very dangerous situation.
I think you're so right. Not only are the opponents of West coming closer together because of the policies of the West, but the Western alliance is just breaking down and fragmenting in all sorts of ways. And also, you're absolutely right. I think the world's changed so much, just even from the first Trump administration to now. They're going to have to realize that this is not the same world that Trump left behind in his last administration, and he needs to come to terms with that quite quickly. How do you see these negotiations that are happening with Iran? I mean, if you look at how this started with the JCPOA that Trump himself walked away from, that was kind of designed to make sure that Iran is at least a year away from making a nuclear weapon. The USA walked away from that deal. Iran stuck to it. The European Union stuck to it, but USA made sure that the European Union cannot do any commercial deals, any contracts with Iran, which was one of the main reasons for Iran to enter that JCPO in the first place. So to kind of, as a leverage, they started increasing the uranium um, um, purification process, took it from 4% to maybe about 60%, where now the USA is saying that they're like a week away from making a nuclear weapon. So how do you see that, the basis of that, but also how we're proceeding with these negotiations?
I see the situation today concerning negotiations and the possibility of war with Iran in a different light, like we have seen this in the first Trump administration, 6, 7, even more years ago. At that time, around 2017, 2018, we still had a big interest, or we watched a very big interest of the European Union concerning Iran. And the European Union was strong enough to withhold, in many ways, American pressure on Iran. Remember when the American side produced new sanctions against Iran at that time, dramatical change, also pressure. Then the European Union said that it will not put new sanctions on Iran. In contrary, it lifted some pressure and lifted some sanctions concerning Iran. There was no clear result in this because both sides, the United States and also the European Union, and stopped going further in any kind of negotiations with Iran. Maybe didn't take the whole issue so much serious for the future because the Ukrainian crisis was so overwhelming, felt in the European Union and the West, that everybody focused now only on this matter, on a new war with Russia. But this has been a mistake, as we see now, because the Iranian situation was put into flux, and nobody cared about this. Now the Americans are coming back, but not seriously, as I see it, to stop the atomic program of Iran. This is not so much the matter like it was before. Now it's simply, as I said, the demonstration of power, that America is still in the Middle East and not China and not others. And second, the United States think that it has not only to defend, but to strengthen the role of Israel in a very, let's say, aggressive, mighty way, so that Israel would stick to its powerful role in this region and will not lose it. what could have been the case 2 or 3 years ago when the whole conflict in Gaza started. So I see it from this point of view. And the European Union, by the way, I mean, you ask me always about the United States, but for me, the decoupling of the European Union from the United States in many ways concerning the Ukrainian crisis also shows that there is a decoupling towards such regional issues like Iran. The EU is not involved in negotiations almost at all, and is leaving everything to the United States, which shows that the European Union is too weak to play any role in this region. That again gives the United States maybe more power and more possibility to act on its own.
That's true, very true. There was some breakthrough, apparent breakthrough, when Steve Witkoff and Iran apparently agreed that in phases Iran could roll back its uranium program, enrichment program, back to under 4%. But apparently, when Witkoff went back to USA under pressure, he had to do a U-turn on that as well, and he said no, 4% is not even enough. Iran has to have zero uranium enrichment, which is something that it's very unlikely that Iran's going to agree to. The kind of surrender terms that they're kind of forcing on Iran, it seems like they're pushing Iran to a corner where Iran just cannot please or cannot give the US what it wants. So ultimately, are they actually looking for war? But it's
I don't know, and you don't know. This is we can only describe the tendencies, but I want to use the opportunity maybe to mention a possible scenario on which you personally have not thought, I think, and nobody has thought so far. And what still, from my point of view, may become some kind of realistic in future. And I mean the nuclear cooperation between America and Russia, starting not in Iran, but in Ukraine, where the United States wants, of course, to have control over the nuclear sites of Ukraine, a state which may fall apart due to the consequences of the war. Nobody is saying this openly. In contrary, everyone wants to stabilize Ukraine, but the real people which understand in the security community what's going on in Ukraine and in the war in Ukraine understand the danger. And through the nuclear sites, like the nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye, for example, is in the limelight. And the United States wants to get control over this. The Russians control this site today. But I figure also outside that there are still some negotiations going on that a kind of joint institution could be created for this matter in order to jointly oversee the nuclear sites and the nuclear industry of Ukraine, not only for economic reasons, because it brings also money, the nuclear plants in Ukraine, but to all sides, but also for security reasons. If this will be materialized, if this will be a success, and that might become a success, then I think that we will see also American and Russian cooperation in Iran. Because you didn't mention it so far, but the Russians are trying to become also very active on the side of Iran. Iran has practically joined the Shanghai Organization for Cooperation. Iran is part of the Eurasian alliances, which under the auspices of China and Russia are being now established on that part of the Euro-Eurasian continent. And I'm sure that Russia is more involved in the future negotiations and of its future nuclear or non-nuclear status of Iran than it's being seen in the West. The United States would like it, but on the other hand, if global cooperation with Russia on nuclear issues, including disarmament issues, on nuclear weapons could be established, I think we are not so far from there. Then we will see a possible cooperation and coming together of American and Russian diplomacy on this very crucial moment and crucial issue on denuclearization of the weapon industry of Iran, and maybe some kind of new institutions in order to bind Iran in some kind of, fruitful cooperation from that side. But again, this is all maybe my fantasy, my positive look into the future, but I wouldn't count out that this situation may also occur, and that would be not bad for the world.
I think I agree with you. I do think that in principle, Russia agrees that Iran should not obtain nuclear status, just because of the knock-on effect it will have and the commitment that Russia has in the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. And I do see an opportunity there for Russia and USA to cooperate, to maybe to a point where Iran could outsource most of its nuclear activity to Russia, or Russia could oversee it and ensure guarantee that Iran is not likely to cross that threshold. However, if that does happen, do you think, first of all, that's a big if, but if it does happen, do you think that's going to be enough to satisfy Israel and the USA? Because nuclear weapons aside, just conventional weapons, now Iran has achieved a status that neither is palatable for the USA or Israel, because just through conventional weapons alone, Iran has the ability now to defend itself against Israel and to even theoretically to destroy Israel if they went to war. How do you think that, because they've been saying that Iran needs to kind of undo its conventional weapon program as well, and also more or less give up its foreign policy in the Middle East. So with some of those things, it just seems like, I don't know if the USA is driven by Israeli, Netanyahu is in charge of USA policy, or if USA has enough sense to make its own decisions in its own interest, because it's not going to be in anyone's interest to have a war in that region.
The last phrase I would underline twice. Nobody has an interest, real interest in a war in Iran, and a prolonging this conflict over Palestine, which has, of course, is combined with Iran in this region, because this region of the Middle East is highly explosive, and as we said in the interview before, it will, of course, have dramatic influence on the life of people in Europe, maybe not so much in the United States, but also in Russia and everywhere. The Middle East problem is growing, and we cannot hide it anymore, or pretend as if it doesn't really exist. So I'm pretty sure that also Israel is not interested in primarily attacking Iran now, understanding that would be a war which would be much more dangerous also for Israel than what Israel is doing in Gaza or in Syria right now. Iran has one of the biggest army in the world, and it has probably no nuclear capacity right now, but it will defend itself, and at least one has to see that Iran may get some allies on its part, mobilized, what I think is being also clearly understood in Tehran and in Tel Aviv, and also in Washington. So at the present moment, I hope that a war can be still avoided. A possibility to avoid the war is this cooperation of bigger states and nations on these issues, like we mentioned in the answer to a question before. But of course, nobody knows exactly what kind of future there will be and what awaits us. We don't have a crystal ball still in our hands. It's, of course, a stupid answer to everything, but it is.
It's so true, though. It's so true. I also think
We have to watch at least and understand that the Middle East is different than it has been 10 years ago, and 10 years ago it is different than time before. We have seen new forces. We see that it's much more complicated to find a solution which would suit everyone. And I repeat again myself, something which is still out of the picture, but in days like now, we have to think about this. We have a possible conflict between India and Pakistan in this center of this region, which can torpedo or change everything.
Yeah.
Also concerning the Iranian issue, if a nuclear bomb, hope that will never happen, but if a nuclear bomb in some case will be used in this conflict between India and Pakistan, or at least the threats will come from one or another country to use a nuclear bomb. You understand that this brings the world in a more dangerous and completely different conflict situation with which everybody had to reckon.
I think you're absolutely right. It is such a dangerous situation at the moment in South Asia between what's happening between India and Pakistan. I do hope and trust that sense will prevail, because two neighboring nuclear powers cannot, first of all, settle their differences with war, or even be threatening each other to go to war. We'll see what happens. There's been some reports that Turkey has sent a number of C-130s to Pakistan with weapons and other help, and similar things coming in from China. Because I think if it seems like India has drawn kind of itself into a corner where it needs to retaliate without getting pure evidence on the table that what happened, Pakistan was behind it. But I think now India's in a situation where to appease its own population, it might have to do some kind of a limited attack on Pakistan. And that attack is definitely going to have a response. And it's easier to start these things. But once they start, it's very difficult to predict which direction they're going to go into.
The whole region is under fire. I think you agree with this statement.
Exactly.
And this is not a populistic statement.
No.
You see the danger of a war between Pakistan and India. You just described of the backgrounds of this. There are also more things to say about this. I mean, this is, I think, right now only the intelligence communities could give us a full picture of what could happen or what will not happen in this region. We see the danger of Israeli-American attack on Iran, which is, I think, should not be underestimated. It's even great that this will happen. Also, especially taking the erratic politics of Trump, with which one has also to reckon. Second, or third, there's a second. Third, we still have the war in Ukraine, which is not only a European war, but also somehow influences the relations of Russia with countries in the Caucasus, which are bordering to Iran, and Central Asian countries, which are bordering to India and Pakistan and Afghanistan. Don't forget this.
Yes.
This is a third factor, which is very dangerous. We don't have the end of the Gaza war still. We don't still know the outcome of what will happen in Gaza. The conflict will continue for another decade, if not decades, if Israel will stick to the position that it will prohibit a Palestinian state in Palestine. So the conflict will either grow This is not the fourth conflict, maybe even the first conflict in this region. And we have a collapsing Syria, by the way,
Yes.
which we not mentioned now. This is a major country in
Yes.
this region, which has no stable government, which could either, I mean, if we are all lucky, it will, under the help of Turkey, Iran, and through the cooperation of greater powers, find to some form of stability or functionless and become not a failed state. But it could turn the other way around, that radical Islamic forces, which are in the region, which are in these countries, and they are there in great numbers and could become more and more organized, could deform Syria into a kind of state which Iraq was 10 years ago, when the ISIS was partly ruling in this region. So you see that I mentioned five really dangerous hotspots. You mentioned another one. This was Yemen, which has also something primarily to do with this all. Now, if you see all that, tell me, where is hope? Where is hope that this will not explode in a huge, major war, which will lead then to something greater than only local conflict in this area?
It's very troubling. When I look at the decline in Western influence, whether it's economic or geopolitical, it just seems to have accelerated. There was a decline happening, but the Ukraine war, I think, has accelerated that decline to such an extent that it was probably unbelievable to think that we're going to end up in this kind of a situation. Um, um, the things breaking down so rapidly between USA and the European countries, but the economic decline of Europe, all of the things. But at the same time, the acceleration of the so-called BRICS nations has been so rapid as well. And there's so many possibilities of growth and success for these countries, maybe led by the trio of Russia, Iran, and China. But so many countries are likely to benefit. And also so many of these countries in this region that you mentioned, countries neighboring Russia, countries neighboring China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, India, these countries will hugely benefit. But somehow these wars need to be avoided for those potentials to be realized and for people to have prosperity and some hope for the future. But it is so scary that so many wars are propping up everywhere, and each one of them just seems more dangerous than the other one. It's very troubling. But I also think that Iran is a very pivotal state in all of this because it has a very important role in the future economic outlook of Russia, of China, the trade routes. So I think it's very important for the world to avoid this potential conflict in Iran.
I maybe belong more to the community of historians rather than political scientists. But I will would say what is not, of course, in the mainstream. But my opinion is that we need a sit down of real major powerful states, great powers, if you want, like in Yalta in 45 or in Vienna in 1815 after the Napoleon Wars, in order to set the world in order, or try to do it. Otherwise, it will not function. And unfortunately, we are back in times where strength counts, and smaller countries which have nothing to say or nothing to show are neglected or are not heard at all. Organizations, institutions which had been created after World War II in order to make the world more or less stable are cracking down. And we have the Chinese superpower in front of the door, which might, some experts think so, even take over from the United States role of the main gendarme in the world. I think it won't happen, but there is a tendency, if you see it, if the United States is weakened in the European Union as well. And what has to be done? Of course, it's difficult to set up such a format like in Yalta and start to rule the world over the heads of others. But probably there is no other way to do it in order to achieve some kind of peaceful resolutions or peace in Europe. But first of all, what I think everybody has to do is to start with the main institution which has to be reformed, and this is a UN Security Council, which is completely, I would say, outmoded. It is old-fashioned. It doesn't correspond, the membership in this council doesn't correspond to the realities of the world. You need other countries, and particularly also India, maybe now also Brazil and South Africa, at least also a major country from the Islamic world, and less European countries, which have to be brought into this narrow circle, which still, in a way, is world government today. No other world government structure has been created so far and will not be created. So let's also focus in all the debates which we lead over wars and peace in all parts of the world, in a crumbling world, one would say, in crumbling institutions in this world, and a very dangerous situation, because if war started, one war, second, third war, it will be too late to stop it. Then we will need another 5 years of complete destruction of our planet, like it was in the Second World War, the First World War, until this things stop, because there will be no people anymore to fight. We don't want this situation. So there is still some time to come together and think in a serious way. And one proposal which I would make is to seriously and quickly reform the UN Security Council, to bring new authorities, new states which have something to say and can also deliver something for the stability of the world into the front position.
I think you're right. It is really, really important, vital, essential at this point to reform these global institutions. I just hope that we can do this before a conflict forces us to do so. In closing, I'd like to ask you, so if you look at the past few decades, there's been lots of provocation from the West towards China. But China has very successfully avoided all kinds of military conflicts and focused on economic growth and connections, networks, establishments. The West, whether we look at Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, it's just Ukraine, it's hard to keep track of all of the wars that the West has been involved in. In your opinion, has there been any benefit for any of these wars for any country in the West? And if not, then why do they keep creating more and more wars? Is this benefiting the lobbies, the military establishment, the military industrialist establishment in the USA? Who is benefiting from this?
Well, the military complexes, the military industries are always benefiting from wars. This is not a secret, and they had benefited from this and will benefit from this. You see now, if the General Secretary of NATO, Rutte from Holland, today calls upon Europeans, European pensioners, European ordinary people to buy the necessary assets of the nuclear industry companies and tell them that they will get a high percentage and high benefits from this. It says everything. Europe wants to get out of its present economic crisis through militarization. In my view, this is very wrong, and it will at least lead to either to war or to the weakening and not to the strengthening of the economic, social model of the European Union and of Europeans. But I will answer the question differently. You have Europe, not the United States, which still firmly believes that the whole world has one day become democratic. And so still the West follows the policy of so-called liberal values, or a feminist foreign policy, like Annalena Baerbock, the former foreign minister of Germany, has put it. This is a new kind of policy, a new kind of ideology in the world, which had not been so witnessed 30 years ago, but it's obvious now that it is the core thinking of the European elites presently, to conduct a value-driven policy towards China, towards Russia, even towards the United States, towards the Islamic world, towards everyone, in order to show that still the Europeans have the better way of ruling the societies and the better morale. And better the religion, if you want, what is, of course, not a real religion. You see, on the other hand, different other ideologies coming up, confrontatory, in confrontation with this value-based driven policy of the European Union. What makes the world dangerous and what leads to a clash of civilization. One, I'm not bringing now Russia as example, because Russia is today a very nationalistic country, and to build up its countries purely on nationalism is of course not enough, and will not lead too far. But I would focus on the Chinese philosophy and the Chinese politics. Chinese politics, it's a nice rhetoric, which always saying that we see the world the hegemonic place where everyone has to understand the other side. But the Chinese, of course, don't tend to understand the other side. They understand themselves, but they are not aggressive so far. Yeah. But the Chinese intention, as I see it, is of course visible, and we have to see it. It's the control over the raw material export routes to the world, to Europe, to the United States, to everywhere. And they will, of course, they are preparing themselves, the Chinese, for the Third World War, which they think will be fought for raw materials, for the control of raw materials. And here, China, if I beg your pardon, of course, I'm arguing philosophically right now, not so much in practical terms, but I want to draw attention that this different tendencies and interests have to be seen, and the dangers have to be seen, the challenges, which we say, have to be seen. The raw material issue, the control over raw materials, the logistic, though, that's something which is completely misunderstood and ignored, for example, in the West. But in my mind, this will play a very important role in the future, and we have to understand this. And at the end, we as a political scientists or historians or experts, our task is to understand the real, not only the obvious or the superficial interests of various actors, but what is the strategy behind this. And I would really recommend to think about this hidden agendas, namely this raw material projects, which certain countries indeed foster and will fight for them. On the other hand, the policy of the European Union to try to make everyone around itself democratic or liberal from their point of view. Trump, which wants still to dominate the world, less through ideology, but through pure power, economic power, which needs to reestablish the United States. Again, all this also leads, of course, to more confrontation and less understanding and less détente and less restructuring of weapons in the world. And this is unfortunately also a tendency which we have to rightly grasp.
Yeah. Also, the Chinese desire to dominate or secure commodities, natural resources, raw material, like you suggested, their desire and the Russian ability control over so many resources makes them such a formidable partnership, which is why really I think this is one of the biggest mistakes of the West, to have these kind of policies that draws Russia and China closer together to this extent. I don't think the West can keep up with this partnership, which is mutually beneficial. What do you think about that?
I think that we have discussed all these issues already. I mean, it could be this way, it could be the other way. I mean, for our listeners, I think we have to try to explain things much simpler. And I'll tell you a very simple story. When we grew up, you and me, in this fine world, yes, for us, I think materialist welfare was important, but also freedom, democracy were things which were key. I think in 10, 20, maybe 30 years, the main issue for politicians or political systems will be not democracy, how to establish democracy or freedom in one country, but how to stabilize the world, which will consist of 10 billion people. This is something which nobody knows how to respond to this question today. We will have an overcrowded planet. We have to deal with this, and quickly we have to find working conditions for people. They have to earn money, they have to get enough energy, they have to get enough food, they have to get enough water. I mean, where will they live? The climate is also changing in many parts of the world, especially in the middle, in Central Africa, or also in the Middle East. So migration will also become a challenge for northern parts of this planet. Excuse me for this kind of picture, that this is something what we should also focus on, because this will be real. These issues are real. They have to be solved very quickly.
Alexander, thank you for your time and your insights. You've depressed me sufficiently, I think. I was going to go and have some breakfast, lunch, go and sit outside, but now I think I'm just going to turn the lights off and go to sleep. But I think what you're saying is all of it is so true and so important for us to come to terms with. It's very dangerous times, and very potentially kind of a time for a lot of global changes that are coming so rapidly, all at once, that is dizzying, but it's also something that current institutions, as you mentioned, are ill-equipped to handle. So we need to kind of change those things. Alexander, I'd love to have you back another day, and maybe we can talk about BRICS
Yes.
and those kind of issues, economy,
If
trade.
our listeners are interested in this kind of conversations, then I'm to your disposal.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
You too. Bye-bye.